Okay, this talk is about, I'm trying to remember a book that I was given to study from in Psychology 101 in 1984. So if I can't get it all, I'm very sorry. It's a very long time ago. But we were given a small book, and it was to discuss quality of information that you could use when you were writing a paper in university. And the book went on and described there was different qualities of data or that you could cite in your paper. And it basically explained that if you were going to go and say, I did my research, and what I did is I went on Google and I was looking up some information on climate change. That would be considered, if you said, this is my research, the psychology professor would fail you, because using Google to go and find things off the internet is not research. But people tell me that all the time. I've done my research. I've read all these studies that I got off the internet. I know what's going on with climate change. You don't know nothing. You don't know nothing. And that is what people say. That's what they call research. So at best, what you're doing is you're appealing to the authority of someone else who says that they've done the research. How do you know they are a valid scientist? Well, it says that they belong to Oxford University. How do you know they didn't spoof that? You might have to actually go and find Oxford University and phone them and say, is so-and-so actually on your faculty? Now, everyone knows there's all kinds of jackasses. If you go to university, you know that some professors are not very good. So even if you see someone is a professor at a university, does that mean that their stuff is good? No, it doesn't. In the old days, if you went to, you published in scientific journals. And in order to get published in a scientific journal, you had to go through what was known as peer review. So your research before you published it, you would submit it to a jury of your peers. In other words, if you're a professor of geography for climate science, you would write your paper and you would submit it to a bunch of other geography professors for them to review. And they would be looking primarily to see if you made any research mistakes. And there are lots of research mistakes you can make. And conclusion mistakes, statistical mistakes, all kinds of mistakes. And if they're doing their job properly, then you have got a peer-reviewed thing, and it gets published into a scientific journal. But you are still depending upon all those professors that are reviewing the paper actually taking the time to do a thorough review and that they picked up on any mistakes. Does it happen? I'm just showing there's holes. I mean, you would think if someone signs off and said, I was one of the ones that reviewed this, that, the professor is putting the weight of their name behind it. But you don't know who these professors are. There's so many universities, and not all of them are at the standard of Oxford or Cambridge in the UK. A lot of them are in hick towns, and the professors that call themselves professors, they're not up to any kind of standard whatsoever. So what does it mean? It means just because you call yourself a professor doesn't mean that you're any good. And as far as getting a PhD, if you think, well, they have a PhD behind them, there's these things that are called diploma mills, where they're not legitimate PhDs, and they're, you can buy a PhD from these places. So there's no quality control when it comes to these people's names. But that's all you're doing if you're saying that's what my research is that I've gone and cited these so-called scientific studies. If you're not a scientist, you're not going to be able to read a scientific study and be able to judge it. You're not. You're just saying, oh, this is their conclusion, and I'm re-reporting what they say. I trust scientists. You're an idiot. You're an idiot if you say, I trust scientists, because you don't know who the scientists are and you can't understand what they're presenting to you. So, well, what am I going to do? I'm not a scientist, and I've got to get an opinion on this topic. Why? Well, at voting time, I got to decide whether I'm going to vote for a carbon tax or not. This is the whole problem with democracy. You give everyone a vote, and you got a bunch of idiots that don't know the first thing about how to tie their shoelace, and they've got a vote equal to yours. So it doesn't matter how much education you've got and how much thinking you've gone and done about the issues. You've got the same say as some jerk who piled out of the bar drunk and stumbled into the voting booth. You've got the same vote. Democracy is stupid. Are you saying that you should have some other form of government? I'm just saying democracy is stupid. People say, well, it's the best we've got. No, it's not. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's full of flaws. But this is just my example. So anyway, if you're saying that you have read all these research by these so-called scientists, who is funding these scientists that you keep quoting and saying, I gotta trust somebody and these are scientists? Who are funding them? You know, like what you have to figure out the money behind the science. Who is funding them? Because all the money behind the science has got an agenda. They either want you to believe there's climate change going on, or they don't. If you got somebody who was neutrally funding these studies, that would be a good thing. But a lot of these studies are funded by institutes, and institutes are funded by corporations, or perhaps political organizations. So they all have an agenda. And what do they want from their scientists? They want the scientists to go and prove what they want for their agenda. This is human nature. So I'm telling you, if you're saying the scientists say this, I'm saying sorry. Now, the other one that I bring up is the huge scandal at the New England Journal of Medicine. The New England Journal of Medicine used to be considered the best journal for medical research to be published in. It was supposed to be vetted the best. So if it was published there, you could treat it like gospel. Well, the big scandal was a bunch of editors from this New England Journal of Medicine quit. And they went to the newspapers and they said, we published a bunch of clinical studies that were crap. They were crap, and we know it was because the drug companies wanted these things published. It's because they wanted to sell the drugs. But the editors quit. So there you go. The very best journals there are, you can't trust them. There's all kinds of scandals. And even among academics, there are huge egos among academics. Huge egos. So, you know, if one academic doesn't like another one, they might not give you a fair review. How do you know? Well, I don't know. It's dramatic. I mean, I just watched a movie, The Man Who Knew Infinity, about an Indian a man from India who was a mathematician, and he went to, it was Oxford or Cambridge in the UK, and this is exactly what he discovered. Now, granted, this was, around the time of World War I, but they show that these are supposedly the best minds in Great Britain, and they've got enormous egos. So, there's huge filters. What else can I tell you about climate change? Well, this is what I tell people when they say, I've read the research. It's like, how much fake news is there? There's incredible amounts of fake news. I see it all the time. In the end, you have to consider me. Am I telling you the truth? Who am I? I'm just a guy on YouTube or Instagram. If you want to know about data and doing research, you got to go there and do it. If you want to know about climate change, you got to fly to Alaska. You got to fly to the North Pole. You got to fly to the middle of Russia. You got to fly to the outback of Australia. You got to fly to Antarctica. You got to fly to the middle of Africa. You got to go all over the planet, and you got to go and get your temperature. Maybe you're going to go set up a temperature instrument that's going to be automatically monitored, but you got to go put it there. And what's to say somebody's not going to come along and tamper with it if you don't have somebody there watching it? There's all kinds of tampering. I was just rereading something about the electronic voting machines and how easy they were to tamper with when they were already being used in the United States. Super easy. College kids were able to break into these machines. So, are you going to trust all this stuff if it's all remote monitored? People can, hackers exist, and if they've got an agenda and they know that you're doing this, am I being a conspiracy theorist? No. You just go look. You go look. You cannot trust this data. You cannot trust it. And, if you're going to say, well, I don't want the planet to go to hell in a handcart, you might as well go get drunk at the bar and vote after you're drunk at the bar. If you're not an educated voter, and you go around, saying this to all the people, this is what it is, this is what it is. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I mean, let's look at in Canada, David Suzuki. Everyone thought he was such a great scientist because he was always on the program The Nature of Things, going on about environmentalism. But it comes out that, David Suzuki loves to, he's got a lot of money. He owns a lot of land, property, and he flies around a lot on jets. And he charges outrageous amounts of money for him to speak on these topics. So, does he have an agenda? He does. His agenda is making David Suzuki lots of money by speaking. And what does he do? He finds outrageous things that are going to push your buttons. Do I trust him? When I was young, I thought he was telling the truth. He was on CBC. You get old and you start to look at the things he says in public, and then you hear the reports, the Vancouver Sun, for example, about the reports on his wealth and what he does. You can't trust him. So you can't trust so-called professional journalists. You can't trust scientists that you get off the internet. What can you trust? Stuff you've done yourself. If you're well educated, educate yourself on how to do things, understand statistics, understand problems with statistics. Correlation doesn't mean causation. There's all kinds of stuff. In order to be a legitimate scientist, you gotta know your stuff. And there's so many people out there that are paid by corporations to come up with the right answer for the corporation. Enjoy your drink. I'm Harry Weaver.